Hi, and welcome to another episode of Hot Takes with me, the Silver Fox. Since we're dragging old leaders of the SNP and putting them as new leaders of the SNP, it seems we must also look at an old First Minister and compare him with the new First Minister. And to this end, we're going to have a look at what Henry McLeish has just said about Holyrood and Westminster. This is a man who was doing this whole thing many, many years ago. And he's saying now that the relationship between the two parliaments, Westminster and Holyrood, is at rock bottom. It seems there is much loathing between the two, although I suspect it's more Holyrood loathing Westminster than the other way round. I think for Westminster, it gets very little thought, whereas in Holyrood, it seems to be an all-encompassing, passion or even obsession, especially with the SNP. But McLeish is saying that it needs to change, it needs to be re-established, and that more needs to be done to align on a lot of things. And I think he's probably quite right. This is someone who's been there, walked the walk, and so he can certainly talk the talk. Let's have a look to see what dear old Henry McLeish actually thinks. Here goes. So, Henry McLeish, Westminster Holyrood relations at rock bottom. Now, of course, McLeish himself isn't without some kind of history. There was the whole scandal, which is why he had to resign, of course, back in 2001, I think it was. Something to do with renting a flat, getting Parliament to pay for it, and then subletting it. So he's getting the double bubble on it. But, he had to go. But, he did a difficult job. He took over after Donald Dewar's death, which was unfortunate and quite shocking. Just, literally, Dewar had only been there, 1 year since the opening, and then carked it, keeled over and gone. He was a fine politician over the years. Henry stepped in, no visions of that, and took over. It was unfortunate for him that he got caught. And I'm not protecting him. No, quite rightly, he got caught and he had to pay the price. You can't get away with this sort of stuff. So, he has that history. We won't hide that. But at least he was there, and he's been around and on the scene for a long time. So he's saying now that the country is more divided than it's ever been in 25 years. And he describes the relations between Holyrood and Westminster as hitting rock bottom. McLeish was the first minister between 2000 and 2001. He was the one during the September 11 attacks, of course. And I believe, and again, this is going back so long, quarter of a century ago, I believe he was the first one to close down any airport in Britain. I think he closed down all the Scottish airports, which is probably a wise move because you didn't know if it was going to be limited to America at that time. So, he was on the ball with it. Anyway, giving evidence at the Scottish Affairs Committee at Westminster as part of the inquiry into intergovernmental relations, McLeish said it may have lulled us into a false sense that it would always be like this. He said in the years since ex-Prime Minister Boris Johnson took office in 2019, there's been a lack of respect for the potential that devolution holds. And he described a pitched battle between unionism and nationalism. Of course, that was always underlying and bubbling, but I think it was brought to a fever point by Nicola Sturgeon and her sort of hate rhetoric that she kept espousing. The ex-Scottish Labour leader recalled being able to pick up the phone to Mr Blair or Mr Cook during difficult situations and said that degree of networking was absolutely solid to developing devolution in Scotland. He said that disrespect from Prime Ministers, including BJ, Liz Truss and Rishi, was costing Scotland and described the political environment as unproductive. Now that's what he's saying, but I would also assume as well that it went the other way because Nicola Sturgeon looked at Westminster like shit on her shoe. She had no respect at all. And when she was involved during all the COVID thing, and they all said, right, we'll all release these press statements at 4 o'clock. Oh, why, she said, and then ran straight out and found the first camera she could so she could be the first one. So she showed no respect either. So let's take a look at it being both ways here. He said, arrogance within the House here, and he's talking about Westminster, does not stand devolution in good stead, and it alienates people. And McLeish said that from 2007, the SNP had been electorally successful, but the country had stalled, and added relations, in my judgment, between Holyrood and Westminster have reached rock bottom. He said the country is more divided than it's been in 25 years, and the issue of independence, in my judgment, is going nowhere. There's an opportunity now to reset about where the issue of devolution may be. Independence isn't going to happen. He's admitting that. And devolution is the strongest devolved government anywhere in the world. You've got nowhere to go in terms of devolution, so you have to make it work. But he's saying that, you know, all these relationships have failed through the years. Well, it's been 17 years of SNP rule has arrived at that. It's 17 years of rhetoric, 17 years of hate, 17 years of creating divisions, often artificially so, to try and prize Scotland away. But Scotland refuses to be pried away, because whilst those in the SNP want it, the people on the ground, the real Scots, the majority don't, because they know the strength is in union. And ironically, it's the very thing that the SNP say. We must get into the EU because there's strength in the union, you know, strength in the European Union. So they want strength in union, but they want to prize away. So it's nothing to do with like being controlled by other countries or anything like that. Whilst in the UK, they have a strong voice in a small pond. Go into the EU, nobody cares. Nobody cares. One only has to look at the Republic of Ireland now to see that the EU don't give one flying F about the the problem that they've got with immigration. They're not going to anger the French just to appease the Irish. The Irish are nobody, and Scotland would be even further down the food chain than Ireland. And yet they're so desperate to get in there. Makes you wonder, doesn't it? Anyway, he says, my view is we need some rules of the game now, and if we don't have any, as an ex-politician, I see a public policy issue ending up in the Supreme Court. And that way, democracy has failed. You need rules of the game if players are behaving badly. He's probably quite right. They are the worst relations for a long time, but a lot of it brought by Sturgeon and her hate and her rhetoric and her division. It's her. As for Henry, I mean, he needs to go back to just bouncing rents and maybe not get caught next time. Thanks very much for watching. I'm going to come up, we will round off the video and we'll move on to the next. There's plenty to do today. So there we are. He is experienced. He's had the top job. He may be a little bit tarnished in his past, but he undoubtedly knows where he's speaking of. And I think he's absolutely right that the Westminster and Holyrood relationship is at a very low ebb. Not yet completely dead, but it's getting that way, and it does need to change, but I don't think it can possibly change with the SNP in charge. The SNP are just too toxic. They're just too anti-Westminster, anti-English, anti-union. They can't bear to even admit the existence, let alone have good communications with Westminster. Sad, isn't it? Because ultimately it's the people who miss out. It's the people who suffer because of this very poor relationship and understanding they have. Anyway, I shall stop there. Thank you very much for watching. Do please hit the subscribe button, ring the bell, leave a like, leave a comment. Please share the video, and I will speak to you later. Bye.